Welcome to episode 320 of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. In this episode, I'm thrilled to introduce Dwayne Semple, who shares his incredible story of recovery after a basal ganglia stroke. As a paramedic, Dwayne's life was turned upside down when he experienced a stroke that left him unable to walk or move his left side. Through his determination, he's found innovative ways to regain his independence, from local rehab to unconventional treatments like etanercept injections administered by Dr. Tobinick. Join us as Dwayne reflects on the challenges of stroke recovery, navigating life on a recumbent trike, and the hope he found through these therapies. This is a must listen for anyone in recovery, offering insight, inspiration, and practical advice from Dwayne's journey. Before we dive into Dwayne's story, I'd like to take a moment to talk about how you can support the podcast. If you find these episodes helpful, inspiring, or insightful, consider supporting the show through Patreon at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Your support helps keep the podcast going, allowing me to continue sharing these powerful stories that provide hope and practical advice for stroke survivors and their families. Whether it's covering production costs or helping spread the word to a wider audience, your contribution makes a difference. And I truly appreciate your support. Thank you for your consideration. Dwayne Semple, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Thanks for being here. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
2 years ago in August 28th, I had a basal ganglia stroke, right-sided, and it put me out of commission for a few weeks, to say the least. Went to the local hospital, spent 7 weeks there, started a rehab program there. We have a central rehab hospital in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is about an hour from me. I was unable to get in to the seventh floor, which is the stroke and head injury unit, at the time because of COVID. So staff and patients were developing COVID fairly quickly. They'd shut down the unit and we couldn't get in. So I started my therapy through the local OT and physio works at the local hospital. So my left side was affected, uh, unable to move my arm, basically at the time unable to sit up. So I had to be very careful, that I wasn't tipping over on. You still there? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, no, my screen went oblong here, and I apologize. Yeah, so left side affected, unable to walk, unable to move my left side. Vision was a little bit blurry, nothing too bad, but I still maintained my ability to speak, much to some people's chagrin, because I'm a talker by nature. And so, I have two older brothers, and they said, we tried for 55 years to get you to shut up, but we are so glad you can speak. So I guess that was a bit of a testament. Um, anyway, following the 7 weeks in the local stroke unit, I got moved to rehab. I spent another 8 weeks in the rehab hospital, learning to walk, learning to, do what I could with my arm. And then I was released just prior to Christmas, 2022. Since then, it's been home therapy and a bit of work with occupational therapy. Physio has kind of let me go now because my walking's, not great. I'm still walking a bit stiff-legged, but still, moving on. Things have been pretty good.
Yeah.
Recently, I guess if that's where I should go now, on the 25th of June. Oh, sorry, no, it was before that. It was my last injection, but I went to Boca Raton, Florida, as you know, to see Dr. Tobinick about the etanercept, perispinal etanercept injections, which I had heard from every source after you have a stroke. whether it's eye of newt, tongue of bat, or whatever, urban remedy, people will start sending you saying, this is great for strokes. And this video did capture me a bit. And I know that it's been widely viewed in other parts of the country as well as, across the world, because he has patients from going there from everywhere. I was a little bit, concerned that it was snake oil sales when I started the research, and I spent, a great amount of time thinking about it, and researching it. And I'm a paramedic by trade, so I'm in medicine. And when we're doing research, we always go to in North America at least, go to our best sources, which are the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of American Medical Associates, and on and on. And that treatment is not something that's, highly recognized in any of these journals. So I read the documents that I could find, which were, the manufacturers of Etanercept, and of course Dr. Tobinick's studies that he had done himself. But that was about all. So that left me even less impressed. So I looked at both sides, the people that I could follow who had success or felt they had success, and the folks that were dead against it, who said, that it is snake oil sales and this guy is, just doing whatever. And it was really one of the selling features was I was watching one of your podcasts, and there was a gentleman, I forget if he was from Tasmania or somewhere, who had flown to the US.
New Zealand. Andrew Stops.
Yes. And I was, his account was honest and so on. And I had researched it to that point where I was at the point of making the checkbox and saying yes. So I reached out, got, an appointment for 2 injections, and from there I went. So it was kind of your show that helped put me over the edge a bit to go do it.
Before we talk about that other side of it, so I want to get a sense of the kind of work that you did beforehand, and your life and all the things that you were doing before stroke that were interrupted, and then we'll talk about where you're at now.
Oh, so, sure.
What was life like before stroke?
So I'm a lifelong cyclist. So I would put on a number of kilometers every week. I enjoyed riding for charity and so on and so forth. So I spent some time, mountain biking and road cycling. As I said, I'm a paramedic by trade. I'm a paramedic manager. So I'd been working, a fair amount through the summer. We're shorthanded. We have offload delays in hospitals and all that sort of thing. And so, there was some extra work going on, but fairly fit, felt great most of the time, and have a property that I love. It's like living at your cottage where I live, and I've been enjoying life. And following the stroke, of course, I'm the other thing I guess I should say is that to get away from work, along with the cycling, I have a little mechanic shop in the back, so I do bike repair as well. So that's my stress relief and my getaway from work as well. So when I had the stroke, the number one thing I was thinking about was, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do any of that. I'm not going to be able to go in and wrench anymore. I can't ride 2 wheels. What am I going to do? So following therapy and getting out of the hospital and rehab, and returning home, getting through Christmas, I started watching videos, and I had a number of people who were inspiring me along the way. Different folks who were checking in on me or calling. There's another cyclist friend who winter cycles, and he gravel bikes and all sorts of things, and he would send me little videos of places he was going, and I thought that was amazing. And just recently I met him on the trail, and I had to get a picture with him and post it on. I have an Instagram account, of course, and as soon as I saw him, I wanted to post that because he really kept me my tires pumped up and kept me moving. Anyway, I couldn't I couldn't imagine what life was going to be like not being able to ride and work for that matter, like right up until now. And I'm coming to the decision actually in the next few days of whether I'm going to be able to really return to work doing what I was doing. So that's another chapter we'll have to talk about another time. But um, I um, I was coming into spring last year, 2023, with trying to figure out what it was going to be like. And all of a sudden, I realized that I think I could still cycle if I used maybe a recumbent bike.
Let's take a quick pause here, but we'll be right back with Dwayne's inspiring story in a moment. Before I continue, I wanted to remind you about my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. It's not just a memoir, it's a guide on how to achieve post-traumatic growth after stroke. In this book, I share not only my own story, but also those of other stroke survivors who turned their trauma into an opportunity for growth. If you're seeking hope, resilience, and practical steps to improve your life after stroke, this book is for you. You can find it on Amazon by searching my name, Bill Gassiamis, or by heading over to recoveryafterstroke.com/book.
I was watching I'm not sure if you know of Paul Pritchett or not. He's a climber from your area who fell and was head injured, and his story is very inspiring as well. And I noticed he was on a recumbent cycle at one point in time, so I started researching. Anyway, there was a local gentleman 8 kilometers from my house. There's very few recumbent trikes in the area, and all of a sudden this appears on a buy and sell, so I went out, gave it a try, and bought it. Anyway, just to make my long story longer, I ended up on three wheels, and I've been having a hell of a time ripping around on this trike, trying to inspire some other stroke folks as well, but more so for me, because it's been my thing, and it's been my release for many years. So the ability to get back out on the road, even on three wheels, not two but three, I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the deficit that you have, what does it stop you from doing? Actually,
Um,
so how does it impact your body, and what does it stop you from being able to do specifically?
well, um, when it comes to cycling, my leg is weak. There are muscles that aren't activated, and so my heel turns in and touches the crank arm on a bike, and I can't pedal it without being clipped in. Now, having left-sided stroke and being weak in my right arm, I can't grip the hand grips of the bike. If I do grip them, I'm scared that I won't be able to let go if I dump it. On the other hand, when I try, I can't hang on for any length of time. My hand sort of just opens up and falls off. Now, I haven't tried it in a while because I'm so used to doing the trike thing now.
Mm.
My walking is limited. I have a bit of a balance issue, and I don't know. It's not as much balance as it is. I don't trust my left side, and my because I had been walking for the last 2 years with my knee locked. Basically, I was walking and using my leg as a splint. As you know, that happens with those of us that can get up and walk. When we do start walking, that becomes an issue. So now I can talk about that piece later, but um, I've built up some great strength in cycling on that side. So getting around isn't an issue. I won't say walking isn't an issue, but getting around isn't an issue. I lost strength, of course, in my left arm, so I'm very limited in what I can do. And I'm left-handed, so I am not writing with my right hand. It's hand scratch at best. Well, my left hand was pretty much hand scratch too, but if you ask any of my colleagues, but I've done pretty well with the exception of that. So everything I did, including brush my teeth, eat and write, everything was with my left hand. Now, if I was playing ice hockey or throwing a ball or whatever, that's all right-handed. So none of that stuff was affected. Not that I play a whole lot of ball, and not that I'm playing ice hockey, but those are those things I did with my right hand anyway. Um,
Mhm. So
so,
you're fairly
oh yes,
active.
yeah, no, go ahead.
You're fairly active. You were out on the bike. Balance is a big deal. Um, Walking is an issue. Everything that makes you kind of comfortable being in the spaces that you've been in before is a little bit altered, a little bit not right. So it's a little bit, you have to find a new way to go about things. Now, I love the fact that you found the three-wheeler. Reason being is because when I have left side deficits as well. So when I first started riding my bike again after many years after brain surgery, my left leg needed to be clipped in. Well, not necessarily clipped, but I could do okay with the stirrup on the pedal.
Yes.
And then what was happening was I'd get to a stop where I'd need to put my foot out, and I'd go to put my left foot out and forget that it was in the stirrup because I couldn't feel it. And then instead of putting my leg down, I would fall over, come to a stop and fall over. And then that happened once. And then one time riding the bike in our central business district, there was some construction work happening, and we call him a lollipop guy with a stop sign came out onto the road, stopped me and said, get off the bike. You're going to have to walk it just for here because the road's closed. And exactly the same thing happened. I went to put my foot down, and it didn't come out of the stirrup, and I fell again. And then I got sick of it because what was happening is my foot was fatiguing. My left leg was fatiguing very, very quickly, even though it could sit on the pedal, it could do the movement. And sometimes my left hand would let go of the handlebars as well. And I'd find myself, kind of in the worst scenario, letting go of the handlebars because my hand didn't realize that it needed to continue holding on. It would just kind of forget to. So it was by chance somebody mentioned that an older guy who was riding a bike mentioned that he had bought an electric battery operated bike that supports the pedaling. It doesn't pedal for you. It just gives you a little bit of sort of, what does it give you? It gives you a little bit of a support in that pedaling motion.
It's an assist. It is, yeah.
Yeah, assistant, yeah. And then the foot wasn't fatiguing when I was doing that pedaling. My left foot wasn't fatiguing, and I could ride for an hour. And therefore, because I wasn't putting in so much effort pedaling, my left arm was also not fatiguing, and I could stay on the bike for longer. And I didn't need a stirrup, which meant that when I needed to stop and put my foot down, it would work as per normal. And it was such a relief to be able to get back on a bike and get moving. And I know there's a lot of stroke survivors who have found the three-wheel bikes, and that has enabled them to feel like it felt to be out and about, even though you're sitting on your butt and you're kind of reclined rather than upright in a bike. They get the same sense of satisfaction being out there.
It's actually a better sense of satisfaction in some ways, because I see a lot more now sitting back, and I'm able to look around. I don't have to worry about potholes. Well, I still have to worry about potholes, but I don't have to worry about getting chucked off my bike as easy. Mm-hmm. I guess I should also preface this with the discussion around how last year I was in a ride with a group of people, and I was riding with a doctor friend of mine, and we were riding a recumbent trike, and we were kicking ass, if you will. When we were climbing hills, we were passing all our counterparts on bicycles, and they had 29-inch wheels, 700C wheels, and we were traveling on these 20-inch wheels, like is on my trike. And, Mike would reach back and I'd high five him when we would pass all these folks. And what I found out was he had a hub motor in the back. It was so quiet, I didn't even know it was there. And so he would turn it on as we were going uphill. So when I got home, I bought one. So I put a hub motor on mine. The thing will do 65 kilometers an hour. Now, don't tell anybody. It'll go really fast, but I don't use it. I'm only using it for hills. And so I've had a lot, I've done some charity rides already this year, and I'm doing, 80, 100K a day kind of thing. I'm not pedaling that every day, but when I do the rides, I'm doing that. And the electric assist has been such a great help. And I'm able, to feel like I'm still part of the team and part of the gang, because I can keep up and I can ride along people, and I can assist the people who are slow. Like kind of one of my jobs was always sweep. I always want to take care of everybody and make sure that they're going to make it, because everybody finishes, right? And so every hill that people need assistance climbing and that sort of thing, I was always involved in that. And now I can do it again. I didn't want to feel like I was the one they were helping, and this has allowed me to do that. So this weekend coming up, next Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we have a paramedic ride in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, which is about 2 hours from here. And we're going to cloverleaf and do probably, I'm right around 100K a day for the 3 days. And so I'm really looking forward to getting together with my colleagues to do that.
Sensational. I love it. Now, with the Etanercept, the snake oil salesman stuff is interesting. I just watched the interview yesterday. The very first interview that I ever saw about it was done about 9 years ago with a reporter from 60 Minutes Australia. He traveled up to Dr. Tobinick's practice. He met some stroke survivors. They had conversations before, they had conversations after, and they reported on two good outcomes during that particular 60 Minutes episode. And then they're interviewing Dr. Tobinick, and Dr. Tobinick's giving his feedback on what he's able to achieve and the things that people have experienced. And then at the same time, he's speaking to stroke survivors, and they are reporting back amazing outcomes. And then he goes to a neurologist who is the opposing view, and he does talk about it as being snake oil salesman kind of things. And the reason he does that is not because there hasn't been results, is because there hasn't been studies done that he can refer to where he doesn't have to take the word of Dr. Tobinick for it. And it's not that etanercept isn't something that hasn't been around forever. It's off-label, which means that it's not patented anymore. And as a result of that, there isn't an ability for anybody, as a pharmaceutical organization, for example, to own the rights to etanercept on their own. And as a result of that, nobody's spending any money so that they can flog etanercept to the rest of the world and say, hey, use this product for everything, like they do with other medications that are brand new, for example, that they invented. So I think it's a little bit dishonest when somebody does a negative version of about a product where there's no evidence because nobody will fund the evidence. I think it's a little dishonest. Like, until somebody has funded the study and that has been proven one way or another, I don't think anybody should have the right to call out somebody.
No.
When the proof should be in the pudding to an extent. Evidence of somebody actually using it and walking is evidence. Like, it's legitimate, even though it hasn't been written down and put into a study. And when you're a stroke survivor, and regardless of what you're recovering from, some people need hope instead of having that hope diminished. And that's the part that isn't spoken about enough. The why is this thing considered by some to be snake oil? That's the part that isn't spoken enough. It's not because it hasn't worked for some people. It also hasn't worked for some other people. So that's important to note. It doesn't work for everybody. And it's usually the type of stroke and the deficits, and whether or not that person has any recoverable areas in the brain.
That's correct. And Tobinick is really good about when you have your first conversation with him, he is very upfront. He doesn't say, "This is going to work for you. I'm selling you this wonderful product and I'm going to stick a needle in your neck and you're going to walk again." He, by no means does he do that. He gets your medical record ahead of time and he tells you that, he said, "Okay, where your stroke is, we've had some luck there. We've had some good luck." He said, "I would expect this is what's going to happen. You're probably, going to get, sensation back in your limbs potentially. If you don't have it, your stroke pains are going to go away. Hopefully your spasticity lessens or goes away. We would hope, but I'm going to tell you that probably whatever you've gained in the use of your arm and shoulder right now, you're probably only going to gain 40% of what you've already gotten. And you're probably, so I felt it was very honest. He didn't give me any high hopes. He just gave me some stuff to think about. He said I was young, I was a good candidate. And I didn't see any song and dance about it. He talked about it. He didn't talk about it, the patient specifically, but he talked about a patient who was from the area that lived in a place that was nearby me, and he and I are the only two so far that have from the province of Nova Scotia that have gone. Now I know that you've talked with a friend of mine, Steve, who is on his way this weekend or next weekend
Steve
to go have it
Lawrence.
done.
Steve's
Steve Lawrence,
episode
yeah.
is going live on Monday, like in a couple of
Oh,
days.
awesome. Awesome. I will certainly tune in. He's got a great story, and he saw a comment I made, and it was probably your podcast, um, that I had made a comment on, and he must research everybody because he tracked me down, and I was actually at the airport on my way home from Florida at the time. And so he came to see me. He lives about an hour away from me. So he came and we met at a park and had a great walk with his dog and his wife and had a great chat about it. And I was very honest about what happened for me. And I told a little story that I'll tell you about another gentleman as well. But Tobinick was very honest about it, and he also said, 2% of the people that we have zero effect. There's absolutely nothing. He said it goes from something very minimal, like numbness and tingling going away, to people that get up and walk more steps than they've ever walked, and so, all of that combined was really the okay, sign me up.
Okay. So tell me about the trip that you took.
So we reached out in February. I hoping that we would get to go to Florida in February because it would be nice and warm there, and it was cold here at the time. But we went there. It was 30 degrees here. It was 42 there for a week, so it was very warm. Um, we we went to Tobinick's office for the first assessment, and they do, here, I'm not sure what they do in other countries. I really don't know. But they do, the MOCA test and a bunch of different things. They do balance tests. They get you to walk and time your walking and that sort of thing.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
And then following the injection, when you go for your second assessment, so I went for a second assessment, and they check to see what your improvement is. And they do some of those measurements again. Now, because cognitively I was pretty good, As you can see, I don't speak terribly. I had no real deficits that way. So it was hard to gauge a lot, but there were some things when I went for the second assessment. But anyway, following the first assessment, I went the next day and had the injection. I'm sure you know all about the injection. They do a paraspinal injection between the fifth and sixth vertebrae. And then they tip you upside down for 7 minutes. I'll tell you, in 7 seconds after I had the first injection, I had numbness that started at my septum, went left to my earlobe, and it only moved an inch, but it moved enough so that it cleared my tongue, so I can taste again on the left side of my tongue, except for the very rim of it, because I was biting it all the time. And that got better. I could taste again. I knew that sensation when it changed. It was just like this warm feeling in my tongue. My tongue sort of got better. I didn't really notice anything. He said, can you put your arm up? Well, I said, that's unfair because I'm laying upside down. If I pick my arm up, it's going to fall over my head, and you're going to take credit for that where it's gravity. And he kind of laughed, and they sat me back up again. And instead of having 50 pounds of weight in my arm, I had 25 now. I still wasn't moving it any better. The pins and it wasn't pins and needles that I had. I was a bit hypersensitive, and the only explanation I can give you that would make you understand is that instead of when you touched Velcro, it felt more like thistles and thorns. It was a lot sharper. So the feeling was more intense, or it was a bit hypersensitive. If it was hot, it was fairly like really hot. Reasonably hot would be really hot, and cool would be cold. But ice didn't really, I could tell the difference in temperatures, but so now it's just numb. It's not hypersensitive like that. The sole of my foot, by that night, the sole of my foot, I became ticklish again. So I'm jumping again. I was a ticklish dude to start with. So if I fell asleep with my hands on my abdomen and I twitched in the night, you'd have to peel me off the ceiling fan because I would jump. So that might not be a good thing, but it seemed like a positive sign, right? So he said, "How about your stroke pain?" And I guess I should mention that my trapezius muscle into my deltoid, down my lats, down my back, and around my shoulder blade, I had this 2 or 3 out of 10 achy, gnawing stroke pain, and a lot of people have it. I didn't realize that's gone. There's none. And so I was quite excited about that when I realized it was gone, because that was a little something like throughout the day, if I had a long, hard day doing something or doing nothing, and that was achy, it would make me a bit irritable, and I didn't care much for that. I don't like to be irritable. I like to be a happy guy and doing my thing. But that's maintained since the very first injection. Anyway, what else? So my gait changed. I felt something activate differently in I guess my lower back or into my glutes, and the walking stiff-legged had changed to me being able to kind of walk normally again. Now I'm still walking a little bit stiff-legged, but I'm able to maintain an almost normal walk. It feels like I'm walking like a chimpanzee when I'm doing it, but my wife videoed me in a mall I don't know if it was the same day or the next day after the first injection, and she posted it on Facebook or Instagram and sent it to family just to say, hey, look what's happened here, where I'd been walking totally different. So that had changed. My gait is shorter, but I'm walking faster, so it feels better. What else? She says my face looks better. I noticed a facial droop on this side, but it's not as pronounced now. And I was always rubbing the side of my face because I didn't know if I was drooling or I felt like I was. I'm hardly doing that at all. Oh, and the other thing, these damn things. So my readers, I seldom put those on now. I used to have them on all the time. If I pulled my phone out, or if I looked at if I was reading a magazine or reading whatever, I needed to have these right beside me, and I put them away. And I have a little bag that I carry with my wallet and stuff in it, and I tuck my glasses in it now, and I forget sometimes to even take them out when I'm reading in them, and so I didn't even realize that was a thing. But
And that was not related to the stroke. That was just eyesight.
no, that was eyesight. I had started wearing readers probably a year before. I went to my eye doc, and she said, "Oh, she said your vision is 20/20. What you need is more light." And I said, "No, what I need is glasses." So she said, "I'll write you a script for readers. That's all you need." So I went to one of the local shops and just bought some readers, and now I have them laying everywhere. But um, I did find that once I had light, it made a big difference. But after the stroke, being in hospital as long as I was, I always had these glasses on because I was always reading. I was always trying to keep my brain occupied. And the unfortunate thing is, though, I spent a lot of time on my phone too, and I, criticize people for spending way too much time on their tablets and their phones. But here I am doing it.
Mm.
But anyway, that seems to be another benefit. I had a number of benefits. So the fatigue is the other thing. So I still get fatigued, but not like I did before. I would go out to my bike shop and tinker around in the mornings until noon, 12:30, come in, make lunch for my wife and I, and then I'd rest until say 2 and go back out for another hour or two, and then come in and be fatigued at dinner time. Now I don't spend the hour at noon doing anything. I barely even come in to make lunch. I'm there, morning until evening, and we do dinner and watch a little TV and go to bed. So my stamina seems to be a little better that way. So I'm appreciating that as well.
Fantastic. So how many injections did you have?
I had 2. As I said, I went back in for a second assessment 5 days later after the first injection. My scores had improved. My times were faster. My speed was faster walking. Now, this is them timing it. So if you want to be, pessimistic and say, well, you really, they just compare the times and add a couple of seconds or take a couple of seconds off, whatever. I don't know, but it all seemed on the up and up to me. I mean, and if I go back and talk about Steve again for a second, Steve was very, very critical about it. He wanted to be very critical about it because he wanted to make sure he's doing the right thing. And I'm like, I can't tell you. I can tell you here, here's what I did and what I've been doing and how this has affected me.
Yeah.
So following the second assessment, I went in for my injection. Now, if I may, I want to tell a bit of a side story, because while we were waiting to go in on the second day, for the second assessment, they wheeled a gentleman out who was in a wheelchair, who was atrophied on his right side in his wheelchair, head down, a facial droop, obviously a stroke. I know the signs very well from my experience,
Profession.
of course, now, but for my profession as well. And I speak to everyone. So I spoke to the gentleman, and he was telling how he had his stroke 8 years before, how he was hoping that he could walk, because all he could do was take a couple of steps to get, to the commode, to the bed, to whatever. He had moved from Minnesota to Phoenix, Arizona, because he was so cold the last 8 years following the stroke and so on. But anyway, he said, oh yes, he wasn't able to really use his arm a whole lot, because when he would move it would go into spasm, and he basically did it there and it spasmed. So fast forward to the next day when I was going in for my second injection, and he would have been there for his first. His wife wheeled him out while she was waiting for their cab to come and pick them up. And he has his hand in the air doing this.
Touching
the right hand,
the thumb to
touching
all
one
fingers.
finger. He was doing that. And I was amazed. So I said, did you get up and walk? And he said, I took about 4 steps. And so I was really terribly impressed with that, and so happy for him, because he was elated. His face was like mine, like he was just smiling and his face looked normal, and so on. And his wife was ecstatic. So hopefully that's all gone well for him. But if that is what I saw, like I shouldn't put it like that, because that is what I saw. But if he was in as bad a shape as he was to start out with, and had all of those deficits, and that happened. That's miraculous at 8 years, but that's fantastic for him. And that was a bit more proof for me that things were uh, going in the right direction, and that this wasn't just just some voodoo medicine that was happening. Following that, sorry, I digressed there, but I wanted to tell that story because that of all things, even for the great things that had happened to me while I was there, that was a great thing for that gentleman, and I was really impressed by that. Anyway, we went in for the second injection. There was another gentleman there from New Zealand, I think, at that day, ahead of me, and they were making a lot of him because of the distance he had traveled. And so we waited a little bit. We went in, and I talked with the doc again about how things had gone, and he did the videos that he does. And so I'm online now. I'm YouTube famous. My few minutes of fame in Tobinick's office, but he asked a number of questions and did the second injection, and I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel a damn thing, and I was a little bit disappointed. But as I sat there talking to him, I could feel something. There was like something happening in my shoulder, and I wanted to play around with it and see what it was, right? So there's a movement that I couldn't do before, and that's going from my arm being up lateral and moving it straight out that I couldn't do, and now I can do it. So there's a muscle that was activated, but that was kind of the only thing following the second injection. And so for me, I feel very lucky. I've had some great support. I've had some fantastic support from friends and family. My wife is absolutely wonderful. I can't say enough about all of the hard work that she's done, and she sat by my side 12 hours a day for 7 weeks while I was in one hospital, and was there for me the whole time, and was the biggest inspiration for me to keep moving forward. And she keeps pushing me, and I'm feeling great right now. If someone were to ask me if this was the thing they needed to do, I would say, I don't know. You need to do what's right for you. Here's what it did for me. And, I spent a lot of time trying to make up my mind, and I studied every little bit. I read some stuff that was negative that made me feel bad about it. And there are things that I watched that I think are miracles, because I'm not sure that it was the power of the human body, I think, that did it for some folks. But
Do you think it was the power of the human body that did it for some? You think it was a little bit of a placebo, perhaps, for some people?
some people, placebo effect. I've again, in different studies and different issues in medicine that I've seen over the years, I've seen people, cured by placebo. Um, People who were thinking they were getting pain medication that were getting, saline.
But in this case,
And
there's no placebo. There's the actual injection. So
that's
that
correct.
the placebo doesn't really apply, surely.
No, no, but that's the thing. And I'm a believer. They convinced me, but they also convinced me that it doesn't work in everybody. So
Yeah.
The
And you might be the guy that it doesn't
potential is
work on.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went fully expecting to be disappointed. I shouldn't say it like that. I was prepared to be disappointed. Let me put it that way.
Mm.
That I wasn't going to be it. I was willing to take the risk. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. I can't say that I'm unhappy in any way, shape, or form, other
Yeah.
than it was 40-degree weather, and it was a hot 10 days while we were there.
40 degrees Celsius
Yes. Yeah.
at the time. My gosh. Yeah. Over 100 Fahrenheit.
Yep.
And what did it cost you?
It was $8,400 US currency for each shot. So Canadian, the trip cost me would have cost me $30,000 Canadian. So that's my hotels, or we had an Airbnb, so place to stay, food to eat, transportation for my wife and I, and then the 2 injections. So it would have been about $12,200 per injection Canadian, I think is how it worked out, somewhere in
Right.
that vicinity.
Right. It's a lot of money. In your case,
Yeah.
money well spent. And that's the challenge that other people sort of go through, is that, why is this guy charging so much for an injection that's off label and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of conversation about that. And I'm not sure whether that is, whether there's any reason to have that conversation or not. The guy is doing amazing things. He has to be able to charge an amount of money that's going to make it worthwhile. That is why nobody else is doing it, because perhaps they don't see there as being any money in it. He is improving people's lives, and I imagine he would have a lot of people who haven't had a good result struggle with that. And I imagine that he's struggling with, not struggling, but he would have people that are going after him, at risk of people going after him legally and all that kind of stuff. So there has to be a buck in it. Otherwise, nobody's
it wouldn't be worth it. And he has a number of staff. So he has probably 3 or 4 people that are office staff. And then he has another half a dozen at least assistants that do the assessments and things for him. So, he has to have, I would say now I didn't ask everybody what their jobs were, but there were I know that there were 2 occupational therapy folks there, as well as sort of residents that were working with him. One girl who had been working with him for a while that was going off to back to school to get her doctorate, and there was another girl who had just come in from Brazil who had studied as a nurse practitioner. So those were the kind of the limited number of people that I talked to while I was there. But I pretty much had the same team that worked with me, during the 2 injections.
Yeah, so it's not one guy on his own in a clinic, just taking people in and injecting them and then out of there,
sending them on their way. Yeah. Now, it does feel kind of assembly line like, but he has 6 people a day. And it takes about an hour. Like we were there probably 2 hours the second day in the second injection, but he wanted to talk about where I lived in Canada. Like his other patient that was from Nova Scotia lives only 20 minutes from me. And so he has a world map that sits behind you, and he has pins in it. And each pin is one person, but if there's a cluster of people come from a certain area, he puts more than one big pin. It puts a bigger pin in to demonstrate, 10 people or whatever. And so we were talking about the area that we live in, because this area, we have the highest tides in the world in this area called the Bay of Fundy. And it's kind of like whitewater rafting on it. When the tide comes in the summer from, the end of May until September, the end of September, people ride these waves when they come in. So they go right from sea level, right from the ground, as the water's coming in, picks these rafts up and things. Anyway, we had this great conversation about the tidal bore rafting and things that happen here, and he was very interested, in the seafood that they get out of that area, the clams and oysters and mussels and that sort of thing. So we had a great conversation. At one point, I'm thinking, this guy just wants to talk about where I'm from. He's not interested in sticking a needle in my neck at all, right? So, but he's very personable, and he was really quite down to earth. He even dug out a few of the studies and pictures of things when they were testing etanercept on lab rats and things, and the folks that were trying to disprove his theories, and actually proved him correct by making their own mistakes, according to him, in the videos and things that he was showing me. So I thought that was, there was quite a bit of honesty to it.
In the 60 Minutes interview, they do a functional MRI, I believe, of one of the patients who has the injection before, and then one of the patients after the injection. The same patient after the injection, I'm not exactly sure how far down, but they do see a larger amount of activity in the brain after the injection. And it's not immediately after. It might be a few days later that the person has the injection. So they have got a lot of evidence to show positive outcomes, not to mention the hundreds of videos on the Institute of Neurological Recovery YouTube channel now, which are pretty compelling as it is. So I would encourage people who are listening and watching to do their own research and make up their own mind. And reach out to people who have been there before and get some feedback, and also see. I'm struggling to find people who haven't had a good result, so I can interview somebody like that as well. They're probably, I don't know, they may not be as enthusiastic to talk about their experience. So that would be good if I could find somebody in that situation that would like to talk about it, so I can also put forward a balanced view of this. But at the same time, I'm not going to hesitate interviewing anybody who has had etanercept, because the whole purpose of this podcast is to bring people to solutions, amongst other things. And that's what I want. I wanted people to come to me and go, hey, there's this thing and you should look into it, because somebody else has had a good result and somebody else hasn't had a good result, but there might be some hope there. That's it. That's what we want to do. Now, I appreciate the difficulty in funding such a trip. 30,000 Canadian dollars is a lot of money, to come by. And I would say that if somebody is very committed to doing that, there's funds, there's way to raise funds as well. There's the what do they call them these days? Those GoFundMe campaigns.
Oh, GoFundMe pages, yeah,
etc.
Yeah.
So there are ways that you can raise the money, and you can get creative. And if you really want to go and try it out, I would encourage you to do the work and find out for yourself. And ring the office, go and see Tobinick, have the initial assessment, do whatever you need to do to feel convinced one way or another whether you should go after it or not. So I'm really glad to speak to you, Dwayne.
I went to the YouTube channel and I went through a number of videos, and I looked for anything where, and I know that they could control it as well. They could probably sneak out anything that people put in that's negative. But I found nothing. There was one person that had a very inquisitive question, and I thought maybe they were being backhanded. So I reached out to them to see, and they were like, no, my question was, and I said, well, I want to do the proper research, and I want to find out if someone has had a bad experience, what it is, because there's no risk. Like I've not heard of anyone who's, had a seizure while they were on the table or had another stroke or anything of this nature, because that was a concern. And when I talked to him, he said, no, we've had nothing like that here. And so everything seemed very risk-free. And so I went, when I went to my physiatrist, when I talked to my occupational therapist, when I talked to my own physician, they all looked at me like I had two heads. But when I gave them my compelling evidence, which was what I did, I studied it, they didn't. All that they basically kind of heard about it, but never really did anything about, like never looked into it a whole lot themselves. They all said, is there a risk? And I said, no. And so I said, the only risk is losing my money by going and not getting anything out of it. And so at the end of the day, I made the risk. I got some benefit, and I feel good. So, I win in that case. However, maybe the next person that goes doesn't get as much of an effect, or no effect. Or yet maybe they get up and walk again. And, and if that's the case, then I am absolutely all for it. I said everybody was reaching out with all their home remedies and so on, using psilocybin, like eating mushroom gummies, eating um, cannabis products, all of those things are shown to help people in some way, shape, or form. Um, different herbal teas and all these other things that people were pushing, but it none of that stuff, any of the stuff that I tried, didn't help me nearly as much as this did. And would I pay $30,000 for some magic mushrooms to help me concentrate better? I don't think so, but I would certainly pay 30 grand to do this. So, you know,
Yeah.
but again, I did that with a lot of support. The money was mine. I didn't, I'm a bit of a proud guy, and I didn't put my hand out at all, but I did also, I had some acute illness insurance that paid out when I had the stroke, and this was what it was for. So I'm happy that I had that. If I hadn't have, I might have second guessed how this all went. But even my financial people were like, if there's no risk to your health, it's only money, man. Go do it.
Yeah, you only live once, man. I completely agree with you. Tell me about, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is 0, nothing happened, it's terrible, and 10 is amazing, the most amazing things happened and it's fantastic, go for it. On what's your experience? What would you say your experience of the positive outcome? How would you rate the positive outcome from 1 to 10?
Well, if you were to say nothing happened and obviously 10 I'm cured, this would have been maybe a 5.
Okay.
But the experience itself for getting rid of the pain and changing some of the things and making what I've got left for life, which is hopefully another 40 years, bearable, right? I've got a better quality of life because of it. That ranks a little higher. That ranks up in a 9 or a 10, but that's a personal view, not, from where I was to where I am, knowing that I had no expectation that I was going to start throwing a baseball or something with my left hand or playing the piano. Oh wait, I never played the piano to start with, but that would have been really amazing. However, I'm really happy with how it went. I could be walking normal, and I could be have all my movements. I could be back on my 2 wheels and living life carefree. That wasn't what I expected. That wasn't what I had studied that would happen. And there were some small miracles that happened, and I certainly appreciated. I appreciated the candidacy that he had, Dr. Tobinick, with me about what potentially could happen and what may not happen, and here I am, happy and willing to support others, and I'm doing that every day. So
Yeah, and you're willing to talk about it and share your story, and that says a lot as well. So what about, how long has it been since the injections now? What's the time that's elapsed?
25th of July. So, we're about a month and a half now ish, kind of. Yeah, I guess so, about a month and a half.
Yeah. Is there any discussion or understanding about whether or not the results that you got wear off or continue to improve over time? What's the long prognosis?
I certainly asked that question, and they say some folks that had their injections 12 years ago have not had any fallback. There's no returning symptoms. Others had, a month following, were back for a second injection, or had issues pop up. But on the most part, a lot of people have had no, that had positive results, have had no recourse, like nothing's come back. Although some people, of course, have secondary strokes and that sort of thing following. So again, they were pretty honest about all of that as well. They basically tell you now, you need to this if you've had positive results now, it's up to you to maintain your health, right? So don't start smoking again. Don't, like, I wasn't a smoker at the time for sure, but they're like, because you had a stroke and you haven't smoked in 6 years, now that you can move your arms again, don't start putting cigarettes to your mouth. That's sort of the thing that they're telling you. Take your medicines, stay healthy, eat good food, right?
Personal responsibility. It's really definitely
Absolutely
necessary for somebody to take action to prevent themselves from having another stroke, and also to keep the gains that they have achieved. It would be terrible for somebody to go through all of that trouble that stroke has created, have an injection, recover, and then start
have
on the
another
bad
stroke.
habits again.
I've never, I've been a paramedic I have been a paramedic for 40 years. I started when I was young, back in the days when funeral homes and it ran ambulance services. I never once had a patient say to me, geez, I wish I had worked harder. I've always had a lot of people say to me, boy, I wish I had taken better care of my health, right? You hear that all the time. And so for those that don't, and I was one of them. I mean, when I went into management, I was eating fast food for meals and things at meetings and whatever, not exercising, stressed out, go home and go to bed instead of going for a walk or whatever. I gained a lot of weight. And I had comorbidities. Both my mom and dad had comorbidities, heart disease, strokes. My mom was a brittle diabetic. And so I developed diabetes in 2020 during COVID. I was just taking oral medications and trying to keep my sugar down with diet, and high blood pressure had set in. I'd never had a high blood pressure reading in my entire life until 2020. And so there's two big risk factors right there, and no doubt in my mind that those were certainly the major contributing factors. The diabetes and the high blood pressure, and my stress level, of course, working in emergency health services is a big thing. So
What was the underlying cause of the stroke?
They didn't really say a whole lot about what there's a lot of what could be's, but I will tell you that my physiatrist and my OT, my occupational therapist, are both. I go in. I just had a meeting on Friday with my physiatrist, and I meet with my occupational therapist this coming Monday, and we're going to discuss my return to work. And they don't want me to go back to work. They want me to go finish out on my long term until my retirement, and go that way. They figure if I go back with the high pressure that I have in the particular job I have, that chances are I'll probably have another stroke, and they don't want that. They said I've done a lot of work to get back on my feet and try and inspire others to do the same, and I feel really good about that. But I also want to feel, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You want to feel like you're a productive member of society. You don't want to lay down and die. And I don't want to be a guy who gets up in the morning and goes to the coffee shop and sits around with a bunch of guys 10 years older than me who've all retired or whatever, and have my coffee and tell my lies and go back home and read the newspaper. Like I want to be productive. I really, really do. So I volunteer with a number of groups right now, and I'm still writing, and I have another young chap who was a bit of a superstar here, and he was in a bad accident a number of years ago, in 2020, I guess it was. And then when he had his accident and was unresponsive, he had a stroke. And so he and I walk and talk and move very, very similarly. And so his friends were a little concerned about him, because this is a guy that's been famous since he was 16 years old. He only lives a few kilometers from me, so I go pick him up and take him out for coffee now, because they were concerned. So we go do coffee and things and exercise together and whatever. So that's given me a bit of a purpose, right? to kind of help him along. So maybe
Mhm.
someday you'll get to interview him. That would be quite amazing. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, why not? So what's it like being the patient instead of the
For
supporter?
the first time, right? So I was 55 years old when I had my stroke. I had always talked about retiring at 55, but that's not the way to go out. And I had never been admitted in hospital myself ever. I'd been in for stitches. I'd been in for coughs, colds, and that sort of thing, x-rays, ECGs, health checks and that sort of thing. Never been a patient. And I was told I was the best patient they ever had in the stroke unit because I did not want to bother them. I would not ring the bell. I would not, like, I only rang the bell twice in 7 weeks while I was there. But of course, I had my wife who sat beside me for 7 weeks too. So that was the bell ringer through the day. But I certainly, I, I didn't want to inconvenience anybody at all. Um, Again, I had a pretty good grasp on things. I was able to, reach the things I needed to reach and get where I needed to go. I could get to the washroom. They had me up showering the next day, and I basically learned how to shower with one arm and one leg on a commode and that sort of thing. And so I wanted to get back to whatever the normal was going to be. I wanted to get there quick. And so I they tell me again I was a good patient, but I certainly didn't think I was, because for me to be a patient was a bad thing, right? I was always trying to help the guy in the bed next to me or whatever, right? So, uh, unfortunate trait I think I got from my dad.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Though you still have a lot of insights. You're a paramedic. Somebody needs help next to you. Well, you can shed some light on that. You're not taking their blood pressure. You're not injecting them with anything. You might just chat to them. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I tell another quick story. So when I went in by ambulance, and of course it's my own crews, right? It's people I know that come to pick me up. So the night I had the stroke, um, I had numbness in my hand, and my wife had her hand on my chest. I guess she was asleep, and I kind of wiggled to get her off me because I just felt like it was the weight of that, her shoulder or whatever that caused that. So then I realized my leg was feeling the same. So I got up and took a step, and what I found was that um, my step was funny and my foot felt funny. I took the second step down and went. So anyway, I hollered. She called 911. Paramedics came and took me into the hospital. And when I get there, of course, there's some of my old staff who work as paramedics in the ER are there, and they're like, "Oh my heavens, what happened to you?" And, "Oh, you seem good. Your grips are good," and so on. So at that time, I was using both hands. I could touch my nose and touch the doc's finger, both arms, and things were coming back. It felt a little weird, but things were coming back. So it was kind of like it was transient. And so I thought, wow, I've had a TIA. That's really bad, right? I needed to go to the washroom. So I begged the nurse, please don't let me bring a commode in. Let me go to the washroom. So I walked down to the paramedic washroom, which is at the end of the hallway, and she came with me to make sure I didn't fall. So I felt good about that. When I got back, they had I guess they were prepped to send me for a CT scan. My wife has an autoimmune condition, and she had an attack while I was there, and it mimics heart attack in a way. She has chest pain, but it's called HAE. It's hereditary angioedema. So she had an attack while I was down having my CT scan. So I get back, and the doctors says, Dwayne, now I need to tell you, Roz has developed some chest pain. And I'm like, okay, so it's an HAE attack. Here's what you need to do. You need to get a large bore IV, and you need to start giving her fluid. If you give her a bit of morphine, that'll make the pain go away. And she takes a C1 esterase inhibitor called Berinert. If you give her that, okay, IV, she needs 4,500 units, and she also should take her or it's not an auto injector, but her preload injection of Firazyr, which is called icatibant. So it's kind of like the epinephrine to a bee sting or an anaphylactic reaction. And the doc's looking at me like I have two heads, and he said, "Dude, you're having a stroke, and you're telling me how to do this?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, that's who I am." So anyway, when the medication came down, they didn't know how to mix it because they mix a liquid like a little vial of saline into a dry dry medicine and makes a sort of a viscous stuff. Anyway, so I get up and I mixed it for them. They were like totally lost at how to mix it. So he's like, "You mixed that for them?" Like, anyway, so he came in and said, I think probably when she's done and your symptoms are going away, we're probably going to send you home. So I said, "Okay, great." He said, "You just rest and have a nap, and when we go to do shift change, I'll wake you up and test again." So he woke me up again at 5 o'clock at shift change, and I felt a little bit weird. I'd put my hand up over my head and it would fall, my left hand. And he said, "That's interesting, but still good. I had kind of equal grips at that time." He said, "Roz is still sleeping, but when she wakes up, I'll probably send you home." So anyway, I just fell asleep again. One of my colleagues came in to check on me to ask if I needed anything else. And he didn't turn the light on. He just opened the door. So the light came in through the door, and I reached up to pull myself up in the cot, and I couldn't move my left arm. And so, of course, then he hit the emergency bell, and that's where it all started. So I went down for my second CT, and they still didn't see anything in the CT, and I didn't get an MRI for another 2 days. Well, it was over 24 hours before I got the MRI. And that's when they found where the stroke was. But
they found the clot. Was it a clot?
Yes, yeah. It wasn't a bleed, it was a clot. However, I had symptoms, and I'm going to forewarn anybody that may be listening to this or watching this, that if you have the slightest symptom that may seem like a stroke, for God's sakes, go get checked. Because what happened to me on Thursday prior to that was we had taken our grandkids to the exhibition. I had left work early to go with them, and of course, following COVID, this is an agricultural exhibition, so they have farm animals and barns and that kind of stuff. So I went to go with them, and I went a bit later. And as I'm walking across the parking lot, I have this what now is drop foot, but I had my toe on my left foot kept dropping to the ground. Didn't happen all the time. It was a couple of times during the steps in that walk for probably 150 meters. I went into one of the exhibits, and they were selling tickets on a handmade quilt or something. So I bought tickets, and when I went to write, and again left-handed, when I went to write my name, the pen felt funny in my hand, and I was a little bit 7 years old again, just for a few seconds. I had no idea. Now I've been dealing with strokes 40 years, right? I've seen the best and the worst in symptoms in people, and I know the symptoms off by heart. However, for myself, I was like, I never even gave it a second thought. But when I went down that night, when I had the actual stroke itself on the Saturday night, I knew damn well what it was, right? And that came back to me that 2 days before, and I'm like, damn, I wish I'd have done something about it. And I think that had a lot to do with why I didn't get thrombolytics. They didn't give me thrombolytics, and I told them up front, I had this and didn't realize. I'm not sure why I didn't get the thrombolytics at the hospital, really, other than neuro wasn't really willing to do it, knowing I had symptoms a couple of days before, because we still give TNK for heart attacks, even if they had symptoms 2 days before, right? So, but maybe there's something neuro I don't know about.
Yeah, maybe neurologically it's a different risk. Interesting. So what would you say was the hardest thing about stroke for you?
Right now, playing with my small grandchildren is the hardest thing that I can't do. Not thinking about myself, thinking about them. But I can't crawl around on the floor, and I can't chase them. I've got a I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. We have 8 grandkids, so they range in age from 10 years old to just around 2 months old, and all sizes in that category. But the 4-year-old, she comes here, I can't keep up with her. She exhausts me in an hour. Doesn't, but I think if I was healthy, hadn't had the stroke, she'd still do that to me. but that's the one thing that's really bothers me, is the ability to play with these kids, because that's what I did prior to, right? I love playing with the grandkids and stuff. However, it limits me. It doesn't. But if you're to say what's the one thing that bothers me the most, that's the thing that's on my mind. Like, it's kind of like I'm not the same, and I can't do what the other grandparents and their parents can do with them. And for whatever reason, psychologically, that I struggle with that. Probably the knowing that potentially very soon I'm going to find out that I can't go back to work and do my craft, is going to be tough as well. But I've also come to the realization that my health is far more important than a stupid job, right? So, and I've stuck all the needles in people and put all the airways in people's. I've saved all the lives that I think I needed to in order to make myself good, and be right with the world. But I certainly am going to miss that.
Fair enough. What has stroke taught you?
Wow. In watching some of the other people that I've encountered in stroke units throughout rehabilitation, and just in sitting in waiting rooms, I've learned so much. And the big thing I've learned is that I'm probably one of the luckiest guys on the face of the earth with the amount of friends and support that I have, that poured out for me. But I've also learned that there are folks, and I think it's probably due to the stroke, that they struggle with the ability to navigate and be positive about it. They feel they've lost everything. And I had one gentleman that was in a ward I was in for a short period of time, who was a big deal in his day. He was responsible for some pretty cool stuff. And I didn't know that at the time, but he wouldn't go to his appointments and things. And he was, but the guy could get up and walk with a walker and wheel a wheelchair like crazy. But his balance was his issue. He couldn't, he could use all his limbs and walk and talk and whatever, but balance was his issue. Now, he couldn't climb stairs or fast enough, and he needed to be able to climb 15 stairs to get to his apartment. And so they took him home to do that. And when he was exhausted, when he got to the top, of course, following the stroke and the fatigue, all the factors that factor in, he was like, "No, they're going to have to put me in a home." And I was like, "No, man, you don't have to go to a home." So anyway, I found out about it, what he did, and I said, "Wow, that's amazing stuff. You need to tell me more about that." So I was trying to inspire him a little bit to think about those days and think about who he actually is, and the fact that if he goes to his therapy classes and things, goes to his sessions, he's going to get stronger. He's going to be able to do it. Anyway, I had to go to my oldest son's wedding in Ontario. I came back with COVID, so they isolated me for 11 days. And I couldn't get near this guy for 11 days. And when I did, he was gone. He had checked himself into another hospital, a medical unit, waiting for placement in a nursing home. The guy's 66 years old. Like, he's young, and he should have been, he's got such great knowledge and stuff. But anyway, my education in how I feel, I think I always think everybody thinks the same way I do, right? And so I wasn't affected, by the stroke the same way, obviously, that he was. And so my ambitions, and I still have ambitions and goals and things, and I think he potentially felt that he couldn't go any further, and that was a struggle for me. That bothered me worse than anything, watching some of the other folks that weren't inspired to do anything. A lot of lessons. If I were to do anything over again, well, if I were to do it all over again when I was in therapy, I'd have worked a hell of a lot harder. Not that I didn't while I was there, but I want more now, because I've gotten some distance, and I feel good. And I think if I had worked harder, I would feel better. Potentially that's all wrong.
Yeah.
That may be in my head, right? So
Yeah. Distance is important, though. You mentioned distance from the incident.
yes,
As it does, like time apparently heals all wounds. Um, Distance does allow people to recover, come to terms with things, adapt, change, overcome. It does allow people to do that, and you can look back in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and things can change. I coach stroke survivors privately, and all the people I coach are on Zoom. And what does a stroke recovery coach do? Well, not much. I just listen and tell them that uh, we're going to check back in 6 months, 12 months from now, and we're going to see how far you've come. And my job is to remember where they were and to report back on how far they've come, because often stroke survivors don't remember how bad they were. They focus on what they can't do, and they get sort of stuck there. And the two people who I spoke to yesterday, both of them were, one of them was 18 months post stroke, and the other one was 12 months post stroke. And I hadn't seen them because it's up to the client to choose their next coaching session. So I don't force it upon them or anything like that. They come when they're ready. And the person who's 18 months out had aphasia, and I had never had a conversation with them in the 12 month in the nearly 18 months that we've been discussing with his partner stroke recovery and all that kind of stuff. And I had a discussion with him directly. And even though he was stuck for some words and some challenges about expressing himself, we actually had a conversation. And I had to remind him that you and I, my friend, I said to him, have never spoken before together. It's always been done on your behalf. And even then, we didn't actually know what you were saying. Your wife was passing information on that she assumed you were saying. And I could see that that was totally frustrating for you, because she was never right, and I never knew exactly what was happening. So he was like, okay. He took that as reality, as truth,
yes, yeah.
And then
it's amazing.
Yeah. And then the lady I spoke to is 12 months out, and she's worried about her memory and all that kind of stuff. And she was a completely different person this time after a couple of months of not seeing each other. And I said to her, you have forgotten how far you've come, because we couldn't have this type of free-flowing conversation. You were far more anxious, concerned, all that kind of stuff. And now you're talking to me about she's 78 years old. I said, at 78 years old, you are looking for your next business deal, and you're negotiating with clients, and you're putting presentations together. You weren't doing that 6 months ago. So it's really difficult for people to notice how far they've come, and they need to be reminded. Yeah. And
I do too.
Distance is great.
I think that, my personality changed a bit. I was using a lot of four-letter words, F sharps in particular. I was injecting them between syllables, and I'm sure that you know that a lot of people do, and people on chemo will tell you the same thing, that word or a similar word will be a word that they use a lot. I looked it up, and there's I forget where I found it. I copied it and put it in. I took a picture of it, and it's in my phone, and it explains that people who have had strokes, head injuries, concussions, that are on certain medical treatments, there were a number of things, will use they'll use a word of profanity to be their most explicit word. And whatever their most explicit word, it could be fuddle-duddle, it could be, ice cream, but they will use that, and they'll use it between syllables sometimes. And that's certainly what I was doing. But the progress even in that, because I knew I was doing it and I couldn't control it. And so I was trying harder to control it. The other thing I was trying to control was emotion. My tears would turn on just in a second. I would get so emotional about stuff. I did it once while we were talking, actually, and I didn't know where it came from, but I did it again today, and it doesn't happen as frequent as it did because, my niece would call and I'd see her face and I'd tear up. But I've got really good control over that now, and so that was a small thing that I recognized that had changed about me. Um, I was always a kind of a heart on the sleeve type of person anyway, but that's come back to the place where it was before. Um, the other thing is
So there's a term for that. That's a pseudobulbar affect.
okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you need to look that up. Pseudobulbar affect, and is very common that people experience. Some people experience uncontrollable laughing, and sometimes at inappropriate moments. Instead of the crying and the emotion, they get laughing.
Yep.
So I get that. I get the pseudobulbar affect response as well. And I'm 12 years post-stroke, and I did a presentation on my book to a room of about 40 people recently when I launched my book. And I cried. I was supposed to speak for 20 minutes. I cried about 4 times during the presentation when I never expected that it was going to happen again. But I couldn't rein it in. It just kept happening, and then I ran with it. I just kept going.
Interesting theory on that. I might look at that because folks with PTSD, exactly the same thing, right? So I do peer referral work, or I did do peer referral work. I spent a number of years working with PTSD, mostly critical incident stress and that sort of thing, trying to get to it before it became PTSD, or here we call it OSI, operational stress injury. And yeah, the tears come readily, and people that are healed who have come through on the other side, who are talking about PTSD, they'll openly burst into tears and they'll say, I'm okay. I'm still a good policeman. I'm still a good fireman. I just burst into tears and I have no idea why. Don't feel sorry for me. And so my son's wedding I was talking about was just post-stroke, about 2 months, and I had to get up and give a little speech. So my disclaimer was, that number one, I might throw the odd F sharp out, or maybe a whole lot of them. And then the other thing was that I might burst into tears, and please don't feel bad about it. They're tears of joy at this point, but it's just part of the stroke.
So my client who I coach with aphasia, he could throw out an F sharp for every expression that he had. So I'm going to do it, and we can swear a little bit on this podcast. It was fucking fuck.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And
Yeah.
and he was so good at saying it. You actually had a sense of his emotion, what he was feeling, what he was trying to express. He was so good at changing the enunciation and the tone and the length and the sharpness of it that you could actually totally get where he was coming from.
Exactly.
Even though you didn't know the sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had patients like that, and I remember an older gentleman one time that we had taken into hospital, and nurses were flabbergasted that that's all this man could say, and this nurse kept saying to him, "You can't use this profanity here," and he was like, like he just kept at it, and he was laughing at her, and that was, he was making fun of that. He knew damn well he couldn't get anything else out, and that was all that was coming, and it was kind of, he was lashing it out just to see what she would do. Oh yeah, you're absolutely correct. I look back now, so I kept a file of photos and videos and things. So when I started going into physio, my wife would come in, the staff would allow her to video or take pictures or whatever she wanted, as long as they weren't in them, kind of thing. So they didn't want to be put on Facebook, and we never did. But I have a file of those photos of me, in hospital, unable to move my left side from the time I got up and started walking, And when I started walking with a parallel bars, when I went to a hemi walker, when I went to a big cane, when I went to a smaller cane, when I went to a single cane, when I was walking on my own, I have videos of me the day that I decided that we were going to get on that trike and give it a try. I have the tears of elation when I rode the first kilometer on it. Like I was so elated that I could do it. Like I don't know if you hit any of those milestones, but I hit a number of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so proud of that. But I've it's certainly been an interesting journey. And when I realized that this was the journey I was taking, and I didn't have to worry about, work and other people at this time, I just had to worry about me. I made it about me. Although, like I said, I can't take other people out of my script, sort of thing. So when I see somebody that's struggling or whatever, unfortunately for me, I'm a helper, and I feel like I need to get my nose into it and help them out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's it certainly helped me along. Let me tell you that.
Ooh,
It's
it
right.
helps
It's
me.
given me purpose.
Yeah, it helps me, mate. Let me tell you, I found my purpose doing the podcast and writing a book about uh, the unexpected way that a stroke became the best thing that happened, because uh, there is so much positive feedback coming back my way. My YouTube channel is full of positive feedback for what the episode that the particular person listened to has done for them or how it has helped them. My email inbox, I get 2, 3, 4 emails a week, people telling me about what a fantastic job I'm doing for them. And it's like, wow, this is a selfish pursuit. I started it for me. I didn't start it for them. But it's what an amazing benefit, to have a selfish pursuit that gives so much. And helping is one of the key ingredients to post-traumatic growth. So my book is basically a book about post-traumatic growth. That I didn't know the term when I wrote the book, so I didn't put that information in there. But since I've presented on the book a couple of times and spoken about it and looked into the research of post-traumatic growth, one of the key essential ingredients is doing something for somebody else, volunteering or helping other people. And a lot of stroke survivors who I've interviewed will say that they immediately found a way to help other people. And if they haven't done it yet, they're saying, I want to help other people.
So I had recreation therapy. They didn't know I was in the facility until 2 weeks before I left, and I'd been there 8 weeks. I play a Celtic drum called a bodhrán. And so it's just a single drum that you hold. And hold on one second.
Very good.
There we go. No, it was somebody calling me on not on Zoom, but on another medium there. Anyway, so they found out about this drum, and there was a guy upstairs that played one, so he brought it down. We tried to harness it to me and tried to figure out how we could play it. It wasn't working out so well. So he said, okay, you need to get a hold of the Tetris Society. And the Tetris Society is a group of engineers and volunteers that come together, and they build adjunctive equipment for people so that they can do the things they love to do, when they have a disability. So in my case, they would build me an adjunct so that I could put pressure on the back of the goat skin to change the tone of the drum. And I was like, okay. So they filled out the form, sent it to the Tetris Society. So the guy from Tetra called and wanted to talk about it. So he said, so what do you like to do? And I said, well, I tinker with bicycles. I'm a bike mechanic, and I do this sort of, oh, really? Well, we have a client who's this. Would you be interested in helping us out? So now I'm a member of the Tetris Society. I helped them out with a couple of things. Actually, I'm helping a gentleman who's got a very rare disease build a flying shuttle for his loom so that he can weave. And currently, and it's been a long process. But anyway, they still haven't helped me with the damn drum, but I've been building bicycles and come up with inventions and ideas to help them out. So I'm hoping that someday I can go back to playing my drum again.
Yeah.
But that is one of the things it does. It gives me pleasure, right, to help out.
Why not? As we wrap up, the last question I'd like to ask you is, there's people listening, they've on our journey to have a similar path or a different path after stroke, what would you like to tell those people?
I think the best thing is to stay positive regardless. And I'm not sure how you do that. I've done that, but I found something every damn day to get up for and be thankful for. Express your gratitude. Um, find the people that fill your basket. So you were talking about the fact that you were filling your own basket, trying to fill your own basket and have filled other people's basket. So that's a movement that started, I think it was in the US. There's a kid's book that was written that's called Have You Filled a Basket Today? And I suggest every adult read that. But it's all about, by you sharing and doing good things for other people, your basket will get filled automatically. Don't let the basket stealers, the people taking stuff out of your basket, ruin your day. You need to be positive, and you need to look for those little things, and you have to set some goals for yourself. I don't mean things that are unattainable, like, I am going to go out and win the $1 million in the lottery. You're not going to do that. But tomorrow, I'm going to walk a little further than I walked today. I'm going to walk a few steps without my cane. So you want to soar just a little bit higher. You just want to take, step up one more rung or take one more stair. You need to do that in order to progress, to feel fulfilled. John Wooden was a UCLA basketball coach, and he was one of the most amazing coaches and one of the coaches that I follow. So one of my things was I taught leadership, and I love leadership because there's so many different things, and not every great leader has all the things it takes. But I followed John Wooden because one of the things he would do is take the basketball players out into the forest, and he'd get them to find a tree, and he'd say, "Okay, everybody climb a tree, and I want you to go as high as you can." Some people would go up, two branches. Some would go right to the top, as far as they could go. And he'd say, "Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go one more. Just take one more branch. Just go one more, and then you can come right down." And they all did. And why did he do that? He just wanted them to step out of their comfort zone. So if you step out of your comfort zone, if it's only one step or 1 inch every day, that'll make a huge difference. And that's what's kept me going. And I preached this stuff for a long time, and I did it. I tricked myself into doing all the right things. Did I have some down times? Kind of. But I always tried to stay positive because I always had something to look forward to, right? As I said, I've got 8 grandkids now. Two of them have come along since the stroke, but so I had 6 at that point. But I had them to look forward to seeing all the time, and all I wanted to do was get out of the hospital and get some hugs and things. And I still feel like I've got some good left in me to try and help. And I want to feel, as I said before, I want to feel productive. So, yep, moving forward, what you need to do is you need to, stay positive and take that one extra step every day.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode. I hope Dwayne's story of recovery and the exploration of treatments like Etanercept through the expertise of Dr. Tobinick provided you with hope and valuable insight. His determination to adapt and thrive despite the challenges of his stroke is truly inspiring. Thank you to everyone who has left a review. It helps others find the show, and it gives much needed encouragement to stroke survivors. If you haven't already, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and sharing your thoughts on iTunes and Spotify. For those watching on YouTube, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on future episodes. If you'd like to further support the podcast, you can do so by subscribing to our Patreon page at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories and maintain the podcast's production. Every contribution, no matter the size, goes a long way in allowing me to share stories like Dwayne's and reach stroke survivors who need the encouragement. And if you're a stroke survivor or know someone with a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. My interviews are unscripted and casual, so just come as you are. Lastly, if you have a product or a service related to stroke recovery, consider sponsoring an episode. Visit recoveryafterstroke.com/contact to get in touch. Thanks for joining me today, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.